Hello and welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast. Charles Anderson Archer, CEO and co-founder of the Thrive Network in New York City, will be sharing with us today about developing as a leader. Before we jump in, here's a word from this episode's sponsor. Element 502 provides online marketing, custom WordPress, and mobile targeting advertising solutions from our element to yours for maximum hugs. Visit element502.com to find out how to get your hug and what affordable digital advertising looks like.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast, where your host, KIRSTEN BULLOCK, interviews nonprofit CEOs and executive directors who share what's working. Show notes can be found at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Please add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. Now, let's get on with the show.
Hi, Charles. Thanks so much for joining me today on this call.
Hi, thank you, Kristen. I'm very glad to be with the Nonprofit Leaders Network this morning.
Thank you. Charles Anderson Archer is an American lawyer, author, speaker, entrepreneur, CEO, and co-founder of the Thrive Network. Thrive services thousands of individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families in New York City and New Jersey. Charles has written a book, Everybody Paddles, that provides strategies to create organizational consensus and productivity through leadership, with the third edition becoming a recent international bestseller. You can read Charles's full bio on the podcast page at nonprofitleadersnetwork.com. Charles, to get us started, could you share a few words about the Thrive Network and the type of work that you do?
Thank you. The Thrive Network is a 501c3 nonprofit organization where our central goal is to enhance the lives of people in need. We offer programs and services so that people can reach their full potential. When we started the organization in 1996, we realized in underserved and under-accessed communities throughout New York City, particularly in Brooklyn, weren't receiving the supports or weren't aware of the supports in order to take care of their family members or loved ones with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we decided to form an organization and to really target those particular areas. And over the last 20 years, we've been able to grow to service over 1,200 people a year in various forms. It's a workforce upwards to 600 and at times a little more than 600 dedicated and committed people.
Wow, so that's a big infrastructure to manage, it sounds like.
It is. It has its challenges and it has its rewards. And I think that other leaders, those in nonprofit and for-profit spaces, will definitely say when you're in a service delivery kind of field where you enhance people's lives and you can see the benefit every day, you accept the challenges as much as you enjoy the successes. Great.
And you were one of the co-founders of that group, yes?
Yes. It's one of the things that I've learned, at least in the nonprofit space, is it's either created by either family members who have some connection to a particular service or mission or need, or colleagues who share similar life goals and interests. And we were on an American Airlines flight in 1995. We saw an advertisement in an American Way magazine that said, "Do you want to start your own business?" And we decided to start a company from 30,000 feet in the air. And we've been very successful and in so many ways lucky to be able to do the work that we do.
Great. And as you were starting it, I'm assuming that your leadership style probably grew over time. If it was just you and a partner, and then what was the next level of growth that you went through?
I think the reality becomes one where, yes, we started a business. Yes, we're very excited to be doing something new and challenging. But the minute where you have to balance your service or your widget or whatever your outcome is supposed to be with employee engagement, employee relations, human resources, that balance becomes at least became my next level of leadership. And I was always very good with talking with people and connecting with services, et cetera. But when you have to manage and direct and actually lead employees, that takes a different skill set. And that was my next level of growth, understanding how to interact according to ethical standards, legal standards, moral standards with other people, particularly employees.
Mm-hmm. And how did you develop that? Was it through just on-the-job training, or did you take formal classes, coursework? How did you develop that?
For me, and I think you'll probably hear this throughout the entire conversation, I believe in investing in your own education. So for me, I went to school, and for me, I went to training courses. There was Stephen Covey at the time. There was all these other outlets where you can go and learn how to become a better leader, how to effectively communicate, how to deal with employee relations and human resources. And I believe that that's how I confronted it really early on before I got to the place of writing books and speaking about it. It was really observing and going to hear from people who had already done it on a much larger scale.
Mm-hmm. There are some nonprofit leaders who seem to think that they don't have time or money to invest in that. They're so busy trying to run the organization. How did you carve the time out to do that, and the funds too?
A lot of it is cost effective. And when I say cost effective, meaning there's audio tapes that you can listen to while you're driving. There's videos that you can listen to when you're home or when you have free time. There's support groups that you could actually talk to. There are mentors that you can find. There are colleagues who, obviously all of your listeners, become your peers who have gone through some of the similar things. But for me, and I think that there's a misnomer, in my opinion, about leadership. Leadership is a full-time job. It doesn't have the flexibility to turn off when we need it to, or be unavailable when we need it to. And for me, I don't sleep a lot, and that might be weird for some people, but I think that there's levels of sacrifice in leadership that you make. And for me, if I can get 4 to 5 hours of sleep, I can function throughout the day. So I would get up early and read before I went to work, or I would stay up late and kind of digest things. But you also realize that there's a lot of leadership in the world by just watching the news, by looking at movies, by watching television shows and things. You can learn what is good to do and what is not good to do. I've spent a lot of time doing those type of things to enhance my own ability. And that's been probably my greatest strength, my drive and my passion to be good at my job and to not just be good for service delivery, but be good for the people that I employ also.
Mm-hmm. And was there a certain stage where you realized that was going to become an issue? Was it maybe size of staff, or was it something that you just innately knew going into it?
You and I have spoken about the fact that I did a TED Talk, and I talked about some of these things during that particular TED Talk. But for me, I worked at the organization from 95, 96 until 2001 when I completed law school. And after law school, I went to become a state advocate for people with disabilities and other not-for-profits. And in 2007, I was asked by the board of directors to come back and become the chief executive officer for the not-for-profit. And the shift occurred when I came back. And that might be, it might be weird for people to hear that I left and came back and then experienced my biggest shift. But for me, the shift occurred because in moments of transition, it's a transition not just for you personally, but for everybody connected to the organization. So when you have to go through such a leadership transition, which people write about it, and I've written about it in my book as well, it really requires people to have buy-in. It really has the ability for you to articulate what your purpose and your mission is in leading an organization. And for me, in 2007 and 2008, that shift occurred because there was a previous leadership team that had worked for a beloved leader. And now I was coming in and I had to demonstrate that I was equally committed to the success of everybody attached to the organization. So one of our mottos became everybody paddles at the same time in the same direction towards the same goal. And for me and for us, that became that everybody plays a part in the success of the organization. It's not just Charles as the CEO or the directors or the entry-level employees. It's everybody plays a part. And I believe that that might have been the biggest shift for me in my leadership style, but also in our organizational history.
And it sounds like you brought a really big sense of a culture of consensus building into what you were doing. Were there any specific things that you did that helped people see their role to paddle and be a part of it?
The one thing is, there's several things. One was I would spend time with new employees. When new employees came in twice a month for orientation, et cetera, I would make it my business to go and speak to them and tell them, not just to really welcome them, but kind of to give them my perspective of where the organization is and where we're going and what's important to the people that we serve and the families that, trust us and the funders and all the other supporters. And I found that employees at the beginning of their interaction with the organization really appreciated hearing from the leader of the organization, which was very good for all of us. Another thing that we did, it was a lot of messaging. The directors of the organization that got together and kind of came up with values for the organization, and those values really became part of our motto and part of our messaging around the organization, around the central office, in all of our literature about the company. And all of those things really let people know on a repetitious basis. You have this slogan for Nike, just do it. And when we talked about accountability and we kept talking about accountability, people understood that they're accountable every day to what we do successfully. And then the third thing I would say that, we did is, as a not-for-profit, we have a tendency at times to live within our own circle. And for me and the board of directors and our leadership team, we really wanted to be a part of the community. So we found ways to let the community know that we were doing good things within Brooklyn or within Queens. And that really helped us as well.
Fantastic. And through all that, there's a temptation of us to sometimes gloss over times that are tough or failures that we've made or learning experiences, whatever we like to call them. Is there something that stands out for you as a big failure or learning experience, and what did you learn from that?
I would say probably one of the biggest learning experiences I had is, as I mentioned about the transition period. People have a tendency not to support things that they don't either understand or fully informed about or agree with. And in my period of transition from one leader to another, not making those staff changes early on in my leadership probably was the biggest learning experience. There were employees that didn't want to see change. And there were people who didn't understand it or could appreciate it or didn't have enough information to make themselves comfortable. And I think sometimes prolonging staffing changes that don't support the team really do have the ability to stifle growth, to stifle performance, to stifle culture and consensus, and take away from the camaraderie that you as a leader want. So I believe my biggest learning experience is, and the advice that I would give to the other nonprofit leaders, when you have someone on your team that has demonstrated everything that they don't actively want to participate in team building, you have the responsibility to not just your service delivery, not just to your funders and families, but to other employees, not to have that person as a member of your team.
And I'm sure that's a hard conclusion to come to. Do you think
it really is? I don't think that, termination or separations for leaders are easy, because it's not just the separation from that one individual. It is remnants of other things that are left behind. So you have to deal with the unintended consequences of some of your decisions. So, it's not an easy decision. And even to this day, those decisions that are made by me are also very challenging, because you want to do what's right. You want and you build really good, positive relationships with employees, et cetera. But at the end of the day, you have to deliver a service. You have to connect with people. And if those connections are not being made, I would rather make a tough decision for the long-term benefit than to be satisfied in the short term, because I don't want to hurt someone's feelings.
Right. And I think sometimes in the nonprofit world, we tend to generally wait too long when somebody has made it clear already that they're not really seeing themselves as a member of the team. Do you have any recommendations or advice for nonprofit leaders who know that there's somebody on their team and they're thinking of them right this instant as they're listening to this interview? They're thinking, oh my goodness, that's the person. Any advice for them as far as mentally how to make that shift from thinking of the nonprofit context into thinking of the betterment of the organization and the team and the services that they're able to provide?
It's probably a little different for me now because I don't have, there's levels from CEO on down, et cetera. But at the moment when I was supervising or having direct reports for maybe 10 or 12 people, it wound up creating a safe space where people knew that they can come and talk to me about anything and it would stay with me. And how I decided to address it would not in any way put them in a conflicting position with their colleagues. And as long as people feel that you have what people know as an open door policy. And for me, open door policy doesn't mean the physicality of the door. It means the availability of the person. So as long as people feel that you are available and that you're willing to listen and deal with things and confront the good and the bad, I think that people would come to you as a leader and share their feelings, and it's up to you as a leader to kind of decipher what's legitimate and what's not legitimate, what you can work through and what you can't work through. But if people feel that they can share, that's been the biggest asset for me in managing a director level team.
Great. And do you see any shifts that have been happening generationally with new employees coming in, or even generationally with new younger donors coming into organizations? Any shifts that you've seen?
I'll talk about those both separately. I think generationally, there is a difference in how we process and how we evaluate and how we, want to build our reputation and work hard, et cetera. What I normally find as a generational shift, and I don't like to say it in the sense of a negativity, there are people of a different generation who come in and want to see immediate change. And that's a good thing, but not understanding the process or not understanding the legality or not understanding the, participatory nature of making decisions, get very frustrated because the things that they think should happen is because they really feel that it could work. But without diving into the culture of an organization over a period of time, they find themselves frustrated because I believe we should be doing this, And regardless of the financial or fiscal or ethical or whatever ramifications, they still want to see it happen. And there's been always challenges between middle management and entry level people because the things that they want to see don't happen at the pace that they would like to see it. On the board of directors, it's a little different because there is the economics of fundraising, there is the experience of governance, there is the education that goes attached with experience that people bring to the table at a governance level. And someone, and it also played for me. I mean, I'm 43 now, but when I was 20, I didn't have the same experiences. So my advice was different. My projections were different. My abilities were different. And when you bring someone in of a different generation, either younger or even older, sometimes you have to go through a period of board training, board education, not just about your services or your engagement with the community or society, but just the kind of building a camaraderie generationally on how people process and how people understand. Those will probably be the biggest shifts I've seen both at the employee level and at the board level.
Okay. So, and your advice, just really taking the time to get to know people.
Yes. My advice would be to take the time to really just talk with them and find out what they're looking for and make sure that they fully are informed with what you do and how you do it and the process of doing it and what's needed in order to accomplish your mission. It's the old saying that communication is key, and constant communication is key. Not good or bad, just constant communication and exchange of ideas is probably the advice I would give everyone.
Mm-hmm. So instead of going in and saying, this is my way and we have to do it this way or it's the highway, that approach really doesn't work anymore.
It doesn't work, and it doesn't work for a leader. You know, right. I know as the leader, I don't have all the answers, and my team knows I want to hear from them. And you know, I want to get their advice. I want to get their opinions, and there's a place and a manner in which to agree and disagree with each other. But as a leader, you know, even all the leaders on your podcast, we know that, you know, it's our team that makes us all productive. And I welcome that type of advice.
Fantastic. And do you have any closing words to provide inspiration or encouragement for our listeners?
You know, when I wrote Everybody Paddles, a leader's blueprint for creating a unified team, it was really all about consensus, and it was all about easy, practical steps that people could implement right away in order to build their own teams and their own cultures, et cetera. And I say all of that to say that reading is probably the biggest asset or advice that we have before us. How can I learn to improve? How can I learn to be better? I don't think that people are automatic leaders. There are some things that are innate, but there are some things that we learn. There's some things that are we experience. And for me, the advice I would give everyone, even college students that I've taught or employees that I meet, it's your responsibility to equally invest in your learning. If you're waiting for your employer or your boss or your colleague to train you or educate you, that's nice, but you must invest in your own education and your own advancement. And I think that when people begin to do that beyond organizational learning, then they will equally grow at a pace that could benefit their companies.
Absolutely. That sounds like great advice. Well, Charles, thank you so much again for joining us today on this interview.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to hearing from all the nonprofit leaders on your network.
Great. And to all of our listeners, thank you for everything you do to make the world a better place.
Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Leaders Network podcast with Kirsten Bullock. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll check out our prior episodes and that you'll pass along our web address, nonprofitleadersnetwork.com, to your friends and colleagues in the nonprofit sector.